The situation surrounding Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever has sparked intense reactions, and not without reason. A series of off-season decisions by the franchise has left many questioning whether the organization is truly building around its brightest star or unintentionally working against her strengths. What makes matters more striking is that leadership figures like Kelly Krauskopf and Stephanie White didn't exactly soften their messaging in public discussions. Taken together with their draft and free agency moves, their comments suggest a vision for 2026 that feels, at best, confusing and, at worst, counterproductive. Frustration among fans has been loud and persistent. To them, this doesn't look like a calculated strategy, it feels more like disorganization at the top. There's a growing sense that Clark, widely considered one of the most impactful players in women's basketball, deserves a clearer and more supportive direction from the front office. The tension only escalated ahead of the 2026 WNBA draft. During that time, Raven Johnson gave an interview reflecting on a past matchup between Iowa and South Carolina, where she described being emotionally shaken by Clark's intensity and competitiveness. The clip quickly gained traction online, especially with the draft approaching and Clark already established in Indiana. So when the Fever used their 10th pick to select Johnson, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Fans weren't just puzzled, they were outraged. From their perspective, it felt like an odd and tone-deaf choice, bringing in a player who had recently spoken about being negatively affected by the team's centerpiece. Johnson later spoke openly about the backlash she received, revealing the severity of online harassment directed her way. The situation highlighted the darker side of sports fandom, where criticism crossed into deeply personal and unacceptable territory. From a basketball standpoint, Johnson's abilities aren't in question. She's known for her defensive skill set, particularly her ability to pressure guards and disrupt offensive flow. Still, the optics of the decision, and the front office's enthusiastic endorsement of it, with GM Amber Cox even calling it a home run, left many struggling to understand the bigger picture. Ultimately, this isn't just about one draft pick. It's about alignment between a generational talent like Clark and the organization tasked with maximizing her potential. Right now, that alignment feels uncertain, and that uncertainty is what's fueling the ongoing debate. There are also real basketball concerns tied to this decision. Raven Johnson stands around 5 feet 9 inches, which puts her on the smaller side for her position, and her ability to consistently create offense against WNBA defenses is still uncertain. That alone wouldn't be disqualifying, but context matters, and Indiana's roster already had a crowded backcourt before draft night even began. Just one day prior, the Indiana Fever added Tyasha Harris in free agency. Pair that with Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, who's on a supermax deal, plus Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull, and the guard rotation was already packed. Minutes were going to be competitive no matter what. Adding another guard, especially one who doesn't clearly expand the team's offensive options, only tightens that squeeze further. When Indiana made the 10th overall selection, the expectation for many was that they'd address a more pressing need. Instead, they doubled down on a position where they already had depth. The result? A roster imbalance that raises legitimate questions about fit and long-term planning. What makes the decision more puzzling is who was still available on the board. There were forwards with the ability to stretch the floor and interior players who could have complemented Aliyah Boston, the kind of pieces that would ease pressure in the paint and create more driving lanes for Clark. Those options aligned neatly with what the team has lacked over the past couple of seasons. Yet, the front office passed on all of them. Analysts from outlets like CBS Sports and the Indianapolis Star didn't outright dismiss the pick, but their evaluations carried a consistent theme. Johnson's defensive upside is legitimate, but the overlap at her position creates a roster-building issue Indiana hasn't clearly resolved. Some fans have tried to take a measured view, suggesting Johnson could carve out a role off the bench. That's not impossible. But in practical terms, 5 guards already need meaningful minutes. A 6th player at the same position isn't just competing, it's fighting for whatever limited opportunities remain, while the front court still lacks depth. Beyond rotations and minutes, there's also the human element. Decisions like this don't happen in a vacuum. They shape expectations, influence roles, and can subtly affect chemistry before training camp even begins. When players enter a locker room where roles feel uncertain or imbalanced, it introduces a layer of tension that no coaching strategy can fully ignore. There's also a layer of tension built into this situation that goes beyond X's and O's. Raven Johnson had previously spoken about feeling emotionally shaken by competing against Caitlin Clark, and now the two are expected to share a locker room, with Johnson fighting for minutes on a team clearly built around Clark. Whether Johnson intended any negativity or not, the dynamic didn't arise by chance. The Indiana Fever made a conscious decision to draft her despite that context, and with other viable options still available. That's what led many fans to question the front office's process. Did leadership, including Amber Cox and Kelly Krauskopf, fully evaluate Johnson's pre-draft comments? Or did they see them and simply decide they weren't important? Either possibility raises concerns, and the draft itself was only part of the broader issue. Free agency made things more complicated, not less. While the team continued to build depth in the backcourt, the front court remained thin. Aaliyah Boston, one of the league's most promising young bigs, is effectively being asked to anchor the entire interior on her own. That's a heavy burden for any player, no matter how talented, especially when facing teams with size and depth inside. Opportunities to address that imbalance were there. Players like Temi Fagbunel, Rebecca Allen, and Azura Stevens offered exactly the kind of versatility Indiana needed. Front-court contributors who can stretch the floor, absorb physical play, and create space for Clark to operate more freely in pick-and-roll situations. These weren't fringe options, they were established players who could have stepped into meaningful roles right away. Yet Indiana passed on all of them. The result is a roster that feels unbalanced heading into training camp. Boston stands as the only true center, supported by traditional bigs who don't provide much perimeter shooting. Alongside that is a crowded group of guards and a limited number of forwards, creating a lineup that could struggle against teams built around size and interior strength. There is also an element of strategic risk in how the team is approaching floor spacing. Their second-round pick, Justine Pissett, brings promising size at 6 feet 4 inches and the ability to shoot. But she's a rookie with no WNBA experience, and relying on a first-year player to immediately solve spacing issues is a gamble. It's the kind of bet that often looks fine on paper but gets tested quickly once the regular season begins and the competition intensifies. Taken together, these moves don't just raise questions about individual decisions, they point to a larger concern about roster construction and direction. When roles feel crowded in one area and thin in another, it can create challenges that show up early and persist unless addressed. Right now, the interior rotation for the Indiana Fever is extremely thin. It essentially comes down to Aaliyah Boston and rookie Justine Pissett, and that's a fragile foundation for a full season. Boston has proven she can score and hold her own offensively, especially against more finesse-oriented defenders. But when she's matched up with bigger, more physical front-court players, the burden becomes much heavier, and the team's limitations start to show. That's not a new issue, either. Indiana has already struggled against teams with size and versatility in the paint, and this offseason didn't really solve that problem. It just added an inexperienced piece and hoped internal growth would cover the gaps. The rest of the front court includes more traditional bigs like Maisha Hines-Allen and Michaela Timpson, who don't stretch defenses much from the perimeter. That becomes a serious concern when facing teams built around strong, multidimensional front courts. Against squads like the Las Vegas Aces or the New York Liberty, Boston can't realistically cover multiple roles at once. And expecting a rookie to compensate for that imbalance right away isn't a sustainable plan, it's more of a gamble. From a tactical standpoint, the roster construction creates predictable weaknesses. Opposing teams will likely crowd the paint in half-court sets, daring Indiana to beat them from outside the forward spots. Without a reliable floor spacing option at the 4, defenses can collapse inward, disrupting driving lanes and limiting offensive flow. What makes this more puzzling is that the team had the financial flexibility to address these concerns. The updated collective bargaining agreement gave Indiana enough cap room to pursue an experienced front-court player without dismantling its core built around Caitlin Clark, Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell. Yet that opportunity went unused, and the front office hasn't clearly explained why. Analysts consistently pointed to the need for a stretch forward as a priority heading into the offseason. That type of player would have helped preserve the effectiveness of Clark's pick-and-roll game by pulling defenders away from the paint. Without it, opposing defenses can sag inside, forcing Indiana into a more crowded and less efficient offensive structure. Instead, the Fever added yet another guard and left the front court largely unresolved. That kind of imbalance doesn't usually go unnoticed. The teams that succeed in the playoffs are often the ones that identify weaknesses like this early and build strategies to exploit them long before the postseason arrives. Adding to the intrigue is the reported shift in offensive approach under Stephanie White. Despite Clark's remarkable ability to create opportunities, leading the league in assists as a rookie and consistently stretching defenses with her shooting range, the plan appears to involve putting the ball in other players' hands more frequently. If Indiana is going to lean into a smaller lineup, it will likely need to fully embrace a faster, more up-tempo style. A slower, physical half-court approach typically requires size and interior depth, two things this roster currently lacks. Without that adjustment, the team risks playing a style that doesn't match its personnel, which could make an already challenging situation even harder to manage. Concern around the Indiana Fever didn't just come from roster moves, it intensified after Stephanie White openly explained her vision. Speaking after the draft, she emphasized lineup versatility, noting that Caitlin Clark can function both with and without the ball, while Raven Johnson is more of a traditional ball-dominant point guard. That comment landed hard because it wasn't vague or open to interpretation. It clearly suggested a shift, more possessions where Clark isn't the primary decision-maker. The issue is that Clark's value is deeply tied to what she does with the ball in her hands. Her ability to pull up from extreme range forces defenses to stretch far beyond their comfort zone. That single threat reshapes the floor, opening driving lanes for players like Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham, creating passing angles into Aliyah Boston in the post, and generating clean perimeter looks for teammates such as Lexi Hull. This isn't about building an offense around one player out of preference, it's about maximizing what statistically works. When Clark orchestrates the offense, the entire system benefits because defenses are constantly under strain. Shifting her off the ball changes that equation. Instead of forcing multiple defenders to react and rotate, she becomes easier to contain, often positioned as a spot-up option rather than the engine of the offense. While she's capable in that role, it doesn't highlight the unique skills that separate her from other guards. Writers who follow the team closely pointed out the same concern. Clark's off-ball play is solid, but it's her on-ball creation that drives Indiana's offensive efficiency. That connection isn't incidental, it's foundational. Reducing her involvement as a primary playmaker doesn't diversify the offense, it risks making it more predictable. From a strategic standpoint, this creates an odd ripple effect. The team appears to be adjusting its system to accommodate a crowded guard rotation, one that includes Johnson, rather than building around its most effective offensive weapon. In that light, the draft pick starts to look less like an isolated decision and more like part of a broader philosophical shift. Coach White framed the change as a way to ease pressure on Clark and expand the team's options. But there's a difference between sharing responsibility and sidelining strengths. Typically, relieving pressure on a star player comes from improving the pieces around them, not by reducing the very skills that make them elite. That circles back to the unresolved roster gaps. While attention has gone to redistributing backcourt roles, the frontcourt issues remain largely unaddressed. Without stronger interior support or consistent floor spacing, the burden doesn't disappear, it just shifts in less effective ways. Seen through this lens, the selection of Johnson aligns more with the coaching approach. If the plan is to have another primary ball handler, drafting a point guard fits the concept. The lingering question, though, is execution. Johnson's defensive upside is clear, but her offensive translation to the WNBA level is still uncertain. And if she's expected to take on meaningful initiation duties, that uncertainty becomes a significant variable in an already delicate system. Taken together, Indiana's approach raises a fundamental question about direction. If Caitlin Clark isn't the primary initiator on every possession, then who is? Right now, part of that responsibility appears to fall on Raven Johnson, a rookie whose defensive instincts are well regarded, but whose scoring and shot creation at the WNBA level remain uncertain. That leaves the team heading into 2026 with three overlapping concerns: a reduced on-ball role for Clark, a front court that lacks spacing, and a new lead guard whose offensive impact is still largely unknown. The messaging from leadership has only added to the scrutiny. Kelly Crawskop stated openly that Clark will need to adjust to the system and roster, rather than the organization reshaping things around her. In a vacuum, that might sound like a standard team-first philosophy, but applied to a player of Clark's caliber, it stands out. She's not just another contributor, she's the engine behind a surge in attendance, attention, and relevance for the Indiana Fever. Historically, successful franchises tend to follow a different blueprint. When teams land a generational talent, the priority is usually to amplify what that player already does exceptionally well. The Chicago Bulls didn't ask Michael Jordan to reshape his identity to fit a pre-existing structure. The Golden State Warriors leaned fully into Stephen Curry's shooting and movement. The Las Vegas Aces built around A'ja Wilson and continued adding pieces that enhanced her dominance. That pattern, build around your star, isn't complicated, but it's consistently effective. Indiana, at least based on these comments, seems to be signaling a different philosophy. Instead of treating Clark as the constant and shaping the roster accordingly, the implication is that the system is fixed, and she's the one expected to adapt. That shift in perspective doesn't just affect internal strategy, it sends a message outward as well. Free agents, rival teams, and even Clark herself can interpret it as a sign that the organization prioritizes its structure over maximizing its most valuable asset. Fans have picked up on that contrast quickly. When you reduce the role of a player whose greatest strength is controlling the offense, a dip in efficiency shouldn't come as a surprise. It's a natural consequence of changing how the system functions. Clark's vision, passing, and decision-making are precisely what elevate those around her. Limiting that influence doesn't ease pressure, it redistributes it in ways that may not benefit the team. Timing also plays a role in how these remarks are being received. On their own, Krauskopf's comments might be interpreted as an awkward attempt to emphasize balance or accountability. But they didn't land in isolation. They came after a draft decision that added another guard, after a free agency period that left the front court thin, and alongside Stephanie White's acknowledgement that Clark could spend more time off the ball. Stacked together, those moves and statements form a clearer picture, one that explains why so many observers are questioning whether the team's current plan truly aligns with the strengths of its most important player. When you step back and look at everything together, the messaging feels aligned in a very specific way. The Indiana Fever front office and coaching staff seem to be steering toward a style of play that uses Caitlin Clark differently from the version that already proved effective. That became even clearer in how leadership discussed the draft. The emphasis wasn't just on selecting the best talent available, it was on targeting another guard. Raven Johnson fit that plan, and the team made a deliberate choice to prioritize that position. What makes this shift so significant is how much of Indiana's offense has historically flowed through Clark's on-ball presence. Her ability to control possessions doesn't just boost her own numbers, it elevates everyone around her. Aliyah Boston benefits from cleaner touches in the post because defenses are stretched thin. Shooters like Lexi Hull and Sophie Cunningham see more open looks when defenders collapse toward Clark. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell often finds herself in favorable one-on-one situations because help defense is already occupied elsewhere. In other words, Clark's role as the primary creator isn't just a stylistic choice, it's the foundation that supports the entire offensive structure. Dialing that back doesn't simply redistribute touches, it alters how efficiently the whole system operates. That's why the front office's stance, particularly from Kelly Krauskopf, has drawn so much attention. Having seen firsthand how the team performed in recent seasons with Clark leading the offense, strong attendance, rising viewership, and improved results, the decision to suggest she should now adjust to the system feels like a departure from what's already been validated. Framed another way, it's a gamble. Instead of doubling down on a formula that has worked, Indiana appears to be experimenting with a new approach at a time when expectations and visibility are higher than ever. To be fair, the roster still has enough talent to compete. Players like Clark, Boston, Mitchell, Hull, and Cunningham form a core that can overcome obstacles on many nights. But there's a difference between managing through imperfections and being positioned to contend at the highest level. Teams don't usually win championships by working around structural flaws, they win by eliminating them. So the real concern isn't whether Indiana can remain competitive. It's whether these decisions limit how far they can realistically go, especially during a window when their key players are in position to contend right now.